We are today privileged to welcome you on behalf of SMEDA and all the SMEDA team members to the Berkey Institute of Public Policy and your good self to grace this occasion and to accept our invitation to give the talk on SME challenges and opportunities in Pakistan. Sir, I would also thank Mr. Shahid Najam Saab and Baba Yak Fateh Mohammad Saab, who were gracious enough to request you on our behalf to find time when we come to Pakistan for this talk. And why and the need, the purpose we have, you very well know that at this juncture in Pakistan, the critical challenges, economic challenges, the financial challenges that are there, and with Pakistan in the IMF program, advanced negotiations that are currently going on. One of the key areas which can lead to income growth opportunity for the youngish population in Pakistan in particular is the SMEs. SMEDA, being the policy advisor to the federal government and across provincial governments, is placed in a position where it can act as a critical platform for all the internal and external stakeholders for the SME sector. So with this kind of a background, we had requested today's set of internal stakeholders to the SME sector and external stakeholders to the SME, government officers, government institutions, the private sector, the critical members of the media reporters, we cover the economic peaks, the opinion makers. So a host, a collection of our stakeholders are present, which work at various levels in the SMEs. And we would like to take this opportunity to all of them to benefit from your talk, and keeping in view of the demand of the audience presence. And based upon that, we would request that the question and answer session, they are able to hear their views and the issues that are confronting them at various levels. So without further ado, sir, I would request your good self.
Well, thank you very much, Hadasab, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to meet with people whose leadership, I would say, is absolutely critical for Pakistan's future. I will get into that a little later, but I am a policy person. When I was briefly with the government of Pakistan, I worked on the policy side of the government. Then when I went to the World Bank, I was during my 7-year tenure, went bankrupt and defaulted on the loan. And I saw what happens to a country when it defaults. And it's a horrible experience. And I hope people in Pakistan recognize that now they are at the brink of that kind of situation, that they don't cross-sectoring. I have written very extensively on Pakistan. I have been, although I have lived outside Pakistan now for 60 years, I have published 6 books on Pakistan, and the latest came out about a month or so ago, in which I look at Pakistan's geographic situation and its interaction with its immediate neighbors, as well as what I call distant neighbors, such as United States, Saudi Arabia, and so forth. I have a feeling, which is that at this time, people in Pakistan are very dejected about where they are and where they are likely to go. And there is a lot of negative talk in the country. Temperamentally, I'm a positive person. And the book that I'm talking about takes a look at the future and says that if we do things right, if we adopt the right set of policies, bright future. Conversation I had with the late President Pervez Musharraf. I saw him.
Apparently, we have lost connection with SMEDA.
Am I being interrupted? Or after doing MSc in physics from Government College Lahore, I went to Oxford. And there was an economist. I don't know how many economists are in the room, but there was a guy called Sir Roy Harrod. He became my tutor, and he was called the moral tutor. And then I was attending classes in physics. So he asked me, he said, "How are your classes going?" I said, "Not well, because I have done all this in Pakistan." So मुझे कहते हैं कि what is your ambition in life? I said, "That's already been settled. I am what's called CSP, civil service of Pakistan. So said if that is the case, you should shift to economics. So he then shifted me to economics and I became an economist. Sir Roy Harrod is known for several, very well known in the economic circles for several reasons. One of them is that he developed what is called the Harrod-Domar. Roy Harrod-Domar was a student of economics in the United States. And both of them at the same time came up with the same conclusion that you can look at the future of an economy by simply dividing the investment rate, investment as a proportion of GDP, by a constant. And that constant they call incremental capital output ratio, ICOR. So they said if investment is X and ICOR is Y, X over Y produces Z, and that is the sustainable rate of growth. तो ये मैंने मुशर्रफ को बताया तो मैंने कहा आपकी इन्वेस्टमेंट इस 14% GDP है और जो ICOR है मेरा ख्याल है it is about 3.5. Now ICOR economists estimate usually the range is between if you are a very efficient economy it is about 3. If you are a very inefficient economy, ICOR is about 4.5. So Benica, I guess Pakistan is around at best 3.5. So divide 14 by 3.5, you get 4. So 4% is your sustainable growth rate. So मुझे कहते हैं कि अच्छा, this sounds very scientific. Have you talked to Shaukat Aziz? मैंने कहा जी, I have known Shaukat Aziz for hundreds of years. He is, when he talks to me, he becomes very insecure. And so there's no point in talking to him. So after this conversation, Shaukat Aziz called me and he said, Barki साहब ये आप क्या अनशंत बातें कर रहे हैं प्रेसिडेंट के साथ वो बहुत फिक्रमंद हो गए हैं. So essentially what I'm saying is that in looking at an economy, you need to look at two things in particular, which is the rate of investment and how efficient the economy is. And if you can improve both, you can sustain a high level of growth. Our growth rate is around 3% now because our GDP to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world at around 12-13%. And we are not a very efficient economy, so our sustainable rate of growth is around 3 to 4%. I have now that at this point, the most critical thing in Pakistan is to increase domestic savings and to increase the share of the government in those savings, and then make sure that the government is making the right use of the resources that it is collecting through the fiscal system. And if these three things can be done, we can look forward to a very healthy growth rate because there are some very positives about Pakistan. Let me just enumerate the positives, and that's where this group comes in. One of the most positive things about Pakistan is its very rich agriculture sector. It is one of the very few countries where bulk of the water used in agriculture is tapped from the rivers, so it's an irrigation system. The second thing that goes in Pakistan's favor is a demographic part. You know that when the 2017 census was done, everybody was surprised, including seasoned demographers that the rate of growth of population was not 1.8, which people had assumed, but 2.4. So since the country has been growing very rapidly, it is a very young population. Something like 50% of Pakistan's population is below the age of 24. Demographers call this line the median, half above and half below. So we are amongst the youngest population in the world we have. So the question is, how can we use this asset, population, in order to grow the economy? The third thing that's very positive about Pakistan is Pakistan's location. If you look at Pakistan's map in the context of where it is in the world, you will see that it sits right on top of India. For India to access China, Pakistan, the Middle East, and so on, transit through Pakistan becomes the most productive way of doing business. And Pakistan should exploit that opportunity. The fourth thing is, and that's going to be my main message to you, that there has been a massive restructuring of the global production system. The international production system has been totally changed since the late 1980s, when people began to talk about some relatively free flow of information, capital, technology, and also to a certain extent people across international borders. Because of that, there has been a major restructuring of global industry. And the main beneficiary of this particular globalization is China. China, as I've said, I worked in China for a very long time. My first visit to China was in 1965. And at that time, to me, I'd gone from Pakistan to China, and China looked less developed, and now it is going to be the second richest country in the world. And they made a remarkable change, and that they have done by doing three things. One, by studying what's happening to the world and fitting themselves into that thing so that they can draw positively from those changes. Second, make use of people to produce more and export more. And third, to begin to develop technology. As you know, at this time, there is an enormous battle going on between China and the United States. The United States is determined to keep China less developed than itself by imposing all kinds of constraints on the Chinese. Another thing that has happened to China is a demographic one. It has one of the lowest rates of population growth in the world. Consequently, it has less and less youthful population and more older population. I forget the exact number, but something like 60 to 70% of the Chinese now are above the age of 65. So there is a gap between what they need in terms of human power and what they have. And in my, I was telling somebody that I worked in China for 8 years, and I visited China 55 times in that period. And my last visit to China, then I got promoted and appointed vice president in charge of Latin America. When I went to see the Prime Minister of China to say farewell, he said to me one thing. थोड़ी सी अंग्रेजी बोलते थे, so we didn't need any interpretation. So he said to me, Mr. Berkey, can you come to my room for a minute? Which surprised me because Chinese never eat in their offices. They have very modest offices, and their meeting rooms are very levelly furnished, so they meet in the living room. So I was surprised when he called his office. And he said to me, as we entered his office, look at look at map. China का map लगा हुआ था उनके दफ्तर के पीछे. So look at map. Strange. I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, explain to me, why do you consider this map to be strange? He said, I thought you will notice it immediately. We are the only large landmass country in the world, which is landlocked on three sides. And we are open only on one side. And so you in the World Bank have been pressing us to relocate some of the people on the eastern coast to the west, and we are going to do that. However, our west is very inhospitable in terms of agriculture and so on. So when we move millions of people to the west, we will need food and other agricultural items. And that's where Pakistan comes in. And we have been approaching Pakistan to build a system of roads which would bring stuff from Pakistan to China and help the new population of this area. But Pakistan is not responding. And story lambi ho jayegi. I ended up talking to Ghulam Asad Khan, whom I knew very well, the president of Pakistan in those days. तो मैंने उन्हें बताया, तो वो कहने लगे कि हाँ मुझे पता है, लेकिन हमारे जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर हैं वो सिर्फ एक मुल्क में इंटरेस्टेड हैं आउटसाइड पाकिस्तान. सऊदी अरेबिया he's not interested in China, just was especially about Sharif. So China is an opportunity, and effect is something which is I'm so glad that Pakistan has agreed to work with China on that. But the Chinese would like to develop the road system that is built under CPEC in such a way that Gwadar becomes big to port. I was several years of a group called Astana Club. Astana is the capital of Kazakhstan, and Astana Club was created by the then president of Kazakhstan. So I then, the first meeting of Astana Club, I was asked to speak about what I saw as the major challenges of Kazakhstan and that area. And I said, what's the best way of developing this area is to do it by developing land-based commerce. And for that, developing a system of roads which links Central Asia through Afghanistan with Pakistan and Gwadar is the way to go. So it was interesting that there was a group of Japanese present, and there were about 30 people who were members of this group. There was a bunch of Japanese. So Japani reacted to my thing, and he said, well, Mr. Berkey was talking. I looked at his resume. He has a very good record as an economist. And then he's worked at the World Bank and has done some very useful work at the bank in the development business. Today, he sounded neither like a great economist or like a great development expert. What is he talking about? Land-based commerce. My name I said, whatever his name was, I said, you are an island. And the only thing you know is how to make use of the sea to do commerce. I said, England, Britain is an island. And that's the only thing they knew. They used the sea to become a great commercial power, but they also used the sea to conquer half the world. You Japanese use the sea to become a great commercial power. You also tried to use the sea to become a great political power. In that you failed. So, chup ho gaya uske baad nahi. So there was an American in that group. And after we broke for coffee, he came to me and he said, his name is Fred Starr. And he said, Mr. Berkey, that was a brilliant response to a very crude comment by the Japanese. And he said, I know Central Asia very well. And I have been to Pakistan several times, met people in Islamabad, and I have tried to tell them that using Gwadar to develop Afghanistan and Central Asia would be very productive of Pakistan. I get no response from people in Islamabad. So can you follow that up? So essentially what I'm saying is that these are the kinds of opportunities that exist. Let me finally, and then I think I've already taken 10, 15 minutes, talk about small and medium enterprise. The world industrial system has changed dramatically in the last 20, 25 years. Economists based in Washington coined the term globalization, which meant easy movement of technology, goods and services across international borders, also to a certain extent people. And that has led to the very rapid development of countries in East Asia, in particular China. Now, as I said, China is going through a very fundamental demographic change. They have begun to restructure their industry. Last time I talked to some senior people in China, they said they are taking advantage of what is called, and that's where you people come in, what is called the supply chain system. Our industries are now linked with small industries in countries which have a large number of relatively cheap labor. And he mentioned Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, and India, not Pakistan. So I said, what about Pakistan? He said, not a very hospitable place for us to work, which kind of disappointed me. And I said, but Pakistan has some very, very interesting small and big industries in China. And this is a senior person from China that I was talking to. And he said, yes, we are aware of that, but the initiative has to be from both sides. And we are prepared to do it, but there is no interest to demonstrate in Pakistan. Shahid Najam once asked me to go to Sialkot. So I made 2 trips to Sialkot. And he, agar election ho, aur ye khade ho wahan Sialkot se, to ye jeet sakte. He's itne popular hai wahan. So I visited 3 industries: leather goods, sport goods, and metalwork, surgical instruments, and so on. They are doing exceedingly well. They have also now constructed an airport and started an airline called Sial Airlines. So I got the impression of very, very enterprising people. So जब सवाल जवाब मैंने पूछना शुरू किए तो I was unhappy by realizing that they are really not studying the world. They are really not fitting themselves into the global economy. And they need to do that. And I said that to them. And they said, आप हमारी मदद करते हैं पॉलिसी साइड पे, कोई सुनता नहीं है हमारी बात इस्लामाबाद. So essentially, I'll conclude by saying that small and medium enterprises in Pakistan at this time could be turned into a major area of growth for the country, as could be the case with the sector of agriculture. Shahid Najam and I have been talking about this for several months. We are misusing our endowment in agriculture. We are producing grain, wheat, rice, cotton, and sugarcane on irrigated land. Irrigated land is an expensive land. The world's three largest producers of grain are the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. All three use rainwater. None of them use irrigated water. We are using irrigated water to produce grain, which is a misuse of a resource. We should be producing high value added crops like fruits and vegetables, animal husbandry, and so on. I don't know how many of you know that one of the major imports that China has from Pakistan are donkeys. Gada, animal gada, not people gada. And we could feed into that supply, into the demand chain and so on. So essentially, I will conclude by saying that what I would like to see by this particular group is development of a clearly stated policy where the SMEs are in this country, what kind of opportunities they have in the world, and how could the state support the development of SMEs so that it becomes a major area of growth. When you talk about state, I talk about 4 or 5 things: provision of resources, provision of manpower, provision of technology, and location. And state has to be involved. And I don't know how much policy work you people do, but that's something that needs to be developed into a major policy issue and for discussions with the government on that. So let me stop.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for this very elaborate discussion talk with regard to Pakistan globally and how does Pakistan's various advantages. So I would, without further ado, open the floor for any kind of observation, comments, questions, and I would request the members of the media also who are present cover this area.
Question from media.
Yes, why not?
सवाल जो है
Kindly introduce yourself, अपना तारुफ करा दीजिए, फिर उसके बाद सवाल कीजिए.
मोहम्मद उस्मान का नाम है. पहले मैं था समाज एक सुनो नहीं मैं आपको बड़े देर से जानता हूँ, आपको इवेंट्स यानी आता रहा हूँ सब. तो कानों में जो ये बहुत बड़े आपको ऐसा ये जो इस पर चल रही है सूरत पाकिस्तान में आज 14-15 रुपए डॉलर अभी सुबह से 2 घंटे की ट्रेडिंग में बढ़ चुका है. तो रुकेगा ये कोई ये वेयर द बक विल स्टॉप, कोई सिलसिला ऐसी नजर आ रही है, कोई चीजें इकोनॉमी की इम्प्रूव होने के इम्कान है.
So the gentleman is Mr. Lukman. He's asking that the fluctuation in the dollar rupee that is going on, and he's quite concerned about this variation that is happening on a daily basis, where it would stop. That is his key questions, when it would stabilize. So the focus is on economic stability.
The government, I think, very correctly has decided that the exchange rate will not be determined by the government, but will be determined by the market, supply and demand. If there is need for dollars, and the price of the dollar will go up. And so that's the right approach. Now, the thing is, we've got to increase exports. We've got to reduce imports. And only then you can bring some kind of a balance between dollar and rupee. However, the difficult decisions that should be taken in order to curtail demand. 2 or 3 things in this context. One, Pakistanis don't like to pay taxes. There is, and I've had extraordinary discussions. Kal ek bachi thi at Institute of Business Administration, and she said to me, you are saying that we should pay taxes. Why should I pay tax if I'm not happy with the way the government is spending the money? I said, if you were to make that statement in the United States, you will land in jail, because it is the primary duty of the people to pay taxes. यहाँ इतना lightly treat किया जाता है tax को, unless you increase, I mean, that's why I talked about this ICOT business. You've got to increase GDP, investment GDP ratio. You've got to give money to the government so that the government can spend it on the right kind of development. What is that? The government needs to invest in education, in development of technology, in improving healthcare, and in city transport. These are 4 things that if I were advising the government, say, focus on that. And I did have a conversation with Imran Khan on this, and I told him that if you ever come back to power, this is what you should be doing. So essentially, fiscal system is a central problem in Pakistan at this time. Contempt about paying taxes and saying that ये किसी की और की problem है, हमारी problem नहीं, ये हमारी problem है. We've got to raise domestic savings, and if we raise domestic savings, it will have a consequence on imports. Now, I was reported as that's, I don't know, 20 expensive cars were imported by the government for its cabinet. That a plane was bought to transport the foreign minister. This is extraordinary when you lack the money to buy essential things, you're spending it on these kinds of things. So, yes, exchange rate is a problem, but the only solution is for the government to increase its savings, the government, people's savings, and its own tax collection, and spend it responsibly. If they do that, I can take a bet with you that the exchange rate will come down.
Thank you, sir. Please,
Sir, may I ask a question?
Ji, please, kindly introduce yourself, please, and thereafter.
Sir, my name is Rizwan Bharti. I'm currently heading PIDC. My question is as follows. I think आपने जो अभी फरमाया, that makes a lot of sense कि हमें as a nation focus करना चाहिए savings पे. But इसकी flip side अगर देखी जाए तो वो ये है कि then the consumption would be reduced if people focus on savings. Tax collection has been an issue in Pakistan, or because of the political reasons, successive governments have not really been able to expand the tax net. तो ये दो चीजें तो हो गई, बट जो सबसे बड़ा इशू रिसेंट डेकेड्स में हमने ऑब्जर्व किया है वो ये बूम एंड बस्ट फिनोमेना है इकोनॉमी का। एंड बूम एंड बस्ट ये है कि आप अगर एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट करना चाहते हैं, आप इकोनॉमी को एक्सपैंड करना चाहते हैं, तो उस पे आप जो बोरोइंग है वो इजी बनाते हैं, इकोनॉमी एक्सपैंड्स, इट हीट्स अप। हमारी तमाम इकोनॉमी जो है या जितनी भी लोकल प्रोडक्शन है इज बेस्ड ऑन इम्पोर्टेड रॉ मटेरियल लार्जली। तो वो इम्पोर्ट्स बिल बढ़ता है, उसको ऑफसेट करने के लिए हमारे पास जो इनफ्लोज की सोर्सेज हैं वो अनफॉर्चुनेटली हम रेमिटेंसेस पे डिपेंड कर रहे हैं, और वो ट्रेडिशनल एक छोटा सा सेट ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट्स है चंद सेक्टर्स का, उस पे हम रिलाई करते हैं। एंड देन गिवन द पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी इन द कंट्री, हम ये भी होप करते हैं कि एफडीआई आए यहाँ पे, विच डजंट रियली हैपन, और वहां से जो है वो जो गैप है वो भी फिल नहीं हो पाता। तो व्हाट डू वी डू? आई मीन ये एक ऐसा कैच 22 डिलेमा है कि अगर आप इकोनॉमी को एक्सपैंड नहीं होने देते, ग्रोथ रेट को इंक्रीज नहीं होने देते, स्टाइफल करते हैं उसको, तो उसकी ये है कि देन यू वुड हैव हायर रेट्स ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट। दूसरी तरफ जो है अगर आप एक्सपैंड करने की कोशिश करते हैं बाय लोअरिंग योर इंटरेस्ट रेट्स और बोरिंग कॉस्ट को कम करते हैं, एक्सेस टू फाइनेंस जो है उसको आप प्रमोट करते हैं, तो आप यू एंड अप विद अ सिचुएशन जहां आपका जो करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट है दैट गेट्स आउट ऑफ हैंड्स, फिर हम भागते हैं आईएमएफ की तरफ और दोस्त ममालिक की तरफ। तो इसका परमानेंट फिक्स क्या है? हाउ डू वी मेक दी what would be the optimal level of expansion or growth of our economy which is sustainable, and how do we go about it?
हम मुझे समझ आ गई बात। Some of the words that you have used are not suitable for this kind of discussion. You're implying that the government, I suppose, is deliberately keeping the economy increasing at a small rate of growth. That is not right. The government, every government tries to improve the economy by having a high rate of growth. The problem is that the government has really not articulated a policy that it needs to adopt in order to increase the rate of economic growth. And second, it must communicate with the people and say to them that there are some sacrifices that they will have to make in order to make that possible. I read a study a few months ago done by some very good economists who looked at Pakistan's economic performance. And I was very intrigued by the finding that large industrialists, large business people are making a lot of money. But what are they spending that money on? They're spending it on real estate. They buy land and they keep the land and they sell the land, and that produces a higher rate of growth than productive economic activities. Now, how do you stop that? You tax that kind of transaction. We pay a very, very low tax on houses that we own. We pay a very rate of tax on the houses that we rent out. We pay a very little rate of growth, rate of tax on selling and buying land. Fiscal system has to be structured in a way that it influences the kind of economic transactions that are being made. And that, unfortunately, is not happening in Pakistan.
Thank you, sir.
Dawood Abdullah, Director Labour, sir. Sir, you rightly point out the small and medium industries like Food and Gujarat, they have not access to the world for their craft, or they are not approached the world, or they are some shy about that. So, sir, what's the solution? Are you propose the China model? Initially, they start exporting by build some export houses. They are not manufacturing; they are middlemen. Introduce their product in the world, and but they are strictly under the control. They have commission from 1% to 5%. Otherwise, what solutions are of that problem?
One thing,
Ji, Mr. Daud Abdullah sir would like to know that how can the Sialkot-based small and medium enterprise go into the high value supply chains, global supply chains? How can they access that? What kind of interventions or they should be doing?
very good question. It's a question I asked when I met these people. The government is failing to do its job. The government should clearly articulate what is the role of small and medium enterprises in Pakistan's future, and then say, if you do your bit, there is something that we need to do also. I don't think that policy dialogue has been established. And a group such as this, I hope it is doing that, should develop a policy plan for small and medium enterprises, and then give it to the government and hold a dialogue with the government and make sure that the government listens and then implements it. One impression I have about Pakistan, and I hope I'm wrong, कि यहाँ लोग बहुत कम पढ़ते हैं. I have written a lot of books, and I don't think those books have been read. I write a weekly column for a newspaper over here. I don't think anybody bothers to read. Shahid Najam and I produce an annual report on the state of the economy, and then we pick a subject on which we have done some research work and present that. And I don't think anybody in the government or even in the private sector reads those reports. So I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to make the government read the stuff. I had an interesting conversation, and I've repeated myself a number of times during this visit to Lahore. There was a senior government official who went from Islamabad to Washington to hold a discussion with the authorities in the United States as to what kind of assistance the US could give to Pakistan. I've known this fellow for a very long time. There was a small dinner arranged by the Pakistani ambassador in Washington. So this fellow came to me and he said to me, if you were in my place, what is it that you would ask the government of the United States to do for us? I said, just ask them to do one thing, to help you with minimizing or reducing the impact of global warming. So वो मुझे कहता है कि what has global warming got to do with us? ये तो इनकी problem. मैंने कहा एक वर्ल्ड बैंक ने रिपोर्ट छापी थी 3 साल हुए, वो आपने पढ़ी है? नहीं पढ़ी. मैंने कहा वो जाके पढ़े. उस पे ये लिखा था that Pakistan is one of the worst affected countries by global warming. And I said that the bank carried out some computer programming to look at what the melting of ice in the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush mountains will do to river flows. First, it will produce floods and excessive rain, which is what happened last year. Then, when the thickness of the ice reduces, that flow will decline, and what is Pakistan today will become a desert. And then the bank went on to suggest, they called the report 12 cascades. And he was not aware of that at all. I said they identified 12 sites where Pakistan needs to build storage dams so that water that is going to be released by the melting of ice can be kept in the country and used when the flow of the water declines. So essentially, we need a government that is serious about finding out what's going on in the world and how it interacts with Pakistan. and then make sure that they adopt policies.
Thank you, sir. Sir, please.
My name is Chariyar, sir. I head external relations at SMEDA. Sir, in your views, how effective do you think are government policy levers, given the fact that we are largely informal economy and even for the SME sector, the banking channels that is they use is only 1%, 150,000 SMEs use banking channel. So we are largely an informal economy. So your views.
RRI&A has had written a brief policy paper on the likely role of the SME sector in the future development of Pakistan. How can that role be changed through the adoption of public policy in the future? What kind of new technology need to be put at the disposal of SMEs? Do the SMEs need to get together and establish institutions of technology which can serve SMEs? If such a paper has been written, was it presented to the government? And was a dialogue established with the government that this is what we have done, now you respond to this, and just keep on pestering them unless you get an answer from them? This is, it's a difficult situation for Pakistan, but you have to do serious policy work and write short policy papers. क्योंकि यहाँ, as I said, लोग बहुत कम पढ़ते हैं, लंबा पेपर तो कोई नहीं पढ़ेगा, but persist with what you consider to be the appropriate SME policies.
So, sir, what's up for
Thank you, sir. Just add to what you are saying. For example, SMEDA is cognizant of some of the challenges that SMEs are facing, and the minister and the secretary under which policy framework we work in, our current focus is on biofuels. So I would share a very interesting example which we are currently engaged in. There is a Pakistani entrepreneur who has recently, in the last 3 years, relocated to Karachi. He is attached with Amazon. He was working with Amazon for the last 15 years and was doing primarily most of his outsourcing from the People's Republic of China. Now, because of the labor costs, he has relocated to Karachi. In north of Karachi, he has set up a facility, and 10,000 Pakistanis are being employed by this young gentleman whose head office is in New York. And from bed linens to home utensils to toys to so many goods that are being used, they are being outsourced for Pakistan. One of the interventions that gentleman plans to do is to use agriculture produced waste in Pakistan. So he has, for demonstration purpose, put up a pallet machine which takes agriculture waste, bagasse, rice husk, etc., converts it into a pellet, and from using it as a boiler fuel to a domestic fuel, that machine is there. SMEDA is currently engaged and at a very advanced stage. Recently, we had an investment conference in Islamabad under the auspices of FAO. We took that gentleman and that product there and showed how through agriculture waste, which we have in abundance, this domestic fuel to boiler fuel issues can be resolved. So, but at the policy level, we would like to pick your brains with permission of the Institute of Public Turkey Institute of Public Policy and sit in this areas exactly, and we would inshallah try to.
So we have some online questions.
Gee, please. Kindly introduce yourself, please, and thereafter, please raise your
This
question.
is, sir, this is Dr. Zulfikar Ali, Director Academics, MPDD, Management and Professional Development Department, sir. Sir, my question is basically SMEs are currently the most important part of the economy of Pakistan, sir. And as we see it, it is basically is not in a very good shape, sir. So what would be your recommendations for the public sector and for the public sector training institutes and departments? What are the capacities deficit that you believe that in the first place government need to address to make the public sector more open to SMEs, sir?
Very interesting question. Let me take an example. I've already mentioned about the competition that is now has taken shape and is going to become even more vigorous between the United States and China on the issue of technology. The Americans are determined to keep China relatively backward in terms of high-level development of technology like artificial intelligence and so on. My suggestion is that the government should carry out a study, and if not the government, maybe our institution could come in, where we look at the changes that are taking place in the global system and what kind of technologies need to be developed in order to take advantage of those changes. And then set up an institution in Pakistan with full participation of both the government and the private sector to develop skills that people have in order to do AI type of work. And then tell the Chinese that if you have run out of people, well, we have trained people and they can do this for you. We can either locate them in China, or if that's not possible, we will do the work that you want to do and make a lot of money out of this from the Chinese. I was associated for a very long time with a company called Nexon, which is based in Lahore. And it's run by 3 or 4 brothers. They are called Gauri brothers. And I have been for the last several years telling them that you've got to move on from what you have done very successfully and you made a lot of money. I mean, their primary job is to develop software for leasing of motor vehicles. And I said, you know, that is such a simple thing. You need to upgrade yourself and you need to set up an institution where you train people to do modern technologies, not just fortunately, they have not responded. So I would challenge SMEDA to identify some enterprises. I mean, he's mentioned one person based in Karachi, to come together and establish an formal institution which picks up young people, both boys and girls, and train them in doing the kind of stuff that the Chinese want done, but will not be able to do because of shortage of manpower over there. That's one suggestion I have, which is I hope the government get exactly what kind of technologies, how they should be taught, what should be the outcome of this teaching. I mean, these are the kinds of policy issues that either SMEDA or us in the institution could develop, and then change the government to adopt to adopt these policies. हमारे यहाँ governance is very weak at this point. People, I mean, a number of us come from civil service background. हमारे ज़माने में civil service was a very serious thing. And we spent a lot of time doing serious policy work and making sure that the policy work that we were doing gets adopted by people. वो अब मेरा ख्याल है नहीं हो रहा to the extent that's.
Can
Thank
I
you.
add? I'm sorry. This
Please,
is an
please,
important
please do.
point if you allow me, sir, with your permission. I think it's a very good question that you have posed, especially coming from the institute, which is training the officers of this country. I have been pursuing with the government, I think for the last 6, 7, 8 years at various forums with various agencies and with the private sector. We need to do mapping of the skills and competence deficit in the country. What we are doing is at the moment it's a supply-driven approach with the government, with the TAFTA, with the NAFTA. These are the training courses. Mr. Berkey was referring to our visit to Sialkot. And they said the kind of a skill, competence, technical expertise that we require, that is not being produced by the government. So we have so many of these training institutions. If we do a serious mapping exercise of the skills and competence, which is presently there, what is required domestically, what is required regionally, and what is required globally. He was just referring to China. It's a huge market. When I was working with the Punjab Investment and Trade Board, South Koreans came to us and we agreed with them that, look, they had the same problem that the Chinese had. We said that you let us know as to what kind of skills or expertise that you require. You produce with us the training programs. We will produce the trained, skilled manpower, which you can use at 1/3 of the cost of the international labor that you are procuring from elsewhere in the world. So I think the first thing that we need to do, and here SMEDA can do a lot. And again, as Mr. Berkey said, we can always help you. Let us do the skills mapping exercise of this country. What is the deficit in the country? What is required in the vicinity because of a geo-economics and geopolitical situation and because of setbacks. And then let's orientate our training institutions, our technical vocational training facilities that we have, and quite a network of these we have, of producing the kind of required demand-driven skill set to respond to the requirements of the world and
Let me add something to what Shahid Rajab is saying by giving you an example, personal experience. My wife does grocery shopping of people of things needed to make Pakistani type of food. And she goes to a store which is owned by a Bangladeshi family. And I went with her, and as she was picking up things, I just went through the aisles. And वहाँ बोरियां पड़ी थी, तो उस पे लिखा था the world's finest basmati made in India. तो मैंने शॉप ओनर से कहा, मैंने कहा ये गलत स्टेटमेंट है बोरी पे. The world's finest rice, basmati rice, is grown in Pakistan. तो वो मुझे बांग्लादेशी कहता है कि आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं. This is Pakistani rice. तो मैंने कहा ये made in India क्यों लिखा है? Because Pakistan does not have the ability to pack it to meet American standards. So what they do is they export rice in bulk to UAE, where it is picked up by the Indians, and Indians have developed the technology to meet with American standards, and then ये बोरी में डाल के then they stamp it made in India. Now, this is a simple thing. Why can't people who grow rice also establish a facility which then packages it according to American standards or British standards or Australian standards? I mean, those are not very difficult things to do, but we don't do it. ये जो जिक्र कर रहे थे by visit to सियालकोट, मैंने उनसे पूछा कि आपकी जो एक्सपोर्ट्स होती हैं उनको आप कैसे मॉनिटर करते हैं कि वो कहाँ गए और कहाँ से किस किस्म की पैकेजिंग होती है। तो वो कहने लगे कि हमारे पास फैसिलिटी नहीं है, हम तो वो सारा इस पे कंटेनर्स में डाल के कराची भेज देते हैं और कराची के लोग उसको डील करते हैं। वी डोंट डू इट। Now why can't they do it? They should. Final product should be developed by them, and for that they need simple facilities. Which did. आपको mangoes के लिए example. We love mangoes. My wife buys mangoes coming from Mexico, coming from Philippines, and so on. They are very expensive. Never seen a Pakistani mango. Why not? Because radiation, Americans need to radiate the food that comes into their country. And it's a very simple process. We are not doing it.
Thank you for these insightful comments, and thank you for the offer, sir. We will definitely take you up on that, and like you said, in these kind of mapping exercises, and therefore give our input in the policy process. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please.
So I'm Nadia Jahangir Seth. I work at SMEDA and General Manager Policy and Planning. You very rightly mentioned that we need to get the policy right. And once we have a policy framework that stipulates where we are right now and where we want to see our SME sector, what kind of challenges that the SME sector faces, what kind of interventions that the government can undertake, and then what kind of commitment we're looking at from the private sector for their own development, because it has to be a joint activity. So over the years, I've been with SMEDA for several years now, and we had our first SME policy framework in 2007. That was the first SME policy for the country. Very recently, we've had this policy framework developed, and some of the things that you've mentioned are part of that policy document. We have an action plan as well. Working within the government itself, you would understand what we faced is immense coordination challenges. So my question to you would be that there are several government entities, business development support entities that deal with SMEs. They have a certain responsibility. They have certain roles assigned to them. How do we crack the code to get the coordination bit right? Because when it comes to implementation, drafting a document, I think is perhaps the easiest part in this thing. But getting into actual practical implementation is where we see problems because of the numerous agencies that are involved in implementing what is stated in the policy. Shahid Najam Saab just mentioned mapping of the skills. I'm very happy to share, actually, this is one of our key recommendations in this policy that has been approved by the federal cabinet. Now, the agencies that are mandated to undertake this exercise, how do we get them, despite the fact that while the policy was being developed, they were part of that, consensus building. So how do you crack the code of coordination and getting implementation on ground?
I mean, the answer is a very simple one. The answer is that you've got to make a nuisance of yourself. And you've got to chase these people and make sure that what you think needs to be done gets done. Use Pakistan has a very good press. Use the newspapers. Get the newspapers involved in pointing out that हम ये करना चाहते हैं लेकिन government नहीं move कर रहे. Put pressure on the government to do things and do them right. I'm very glad that you're doing this policy work and so on. But the next step is that you're absolutely right in pointing out the ability of the government first to read the policy paper, then see what are the 6 steps they have to take, and then follow up with you whether those steps that they want to take are the correct steps and so on. It has to be a continuous dialogue. And that, because SMEDA will have, SMEDA leadership will have to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this.
I showed you just one slide.
Please.
Yes, this much. This one. COSGAP is the Turkish. You must be aware of that. It's an empowered cause. Look at it, HR, structure, procedure, system, and culture which they have evolved over the years. I'm sorry, I'm taking a few moments from your time. Look at the political ownership. Since 1998, 1990, conducive business environment for SMEs, following twin approach, employment growth and productivity growth. Fourth and fifth five-year plan, 73 to 78, right, all along. Ninth plan, 2007 to 2013, when I was transferred. I mean, this presentation sort of dates back to my working with the United Nations model. And all the greater emphasis was placed on contribution. Look at the fragmentation of the policies and the institutional mechanism in Turkey also. There is Ministry of Industries and Trade, there is State Planning Organization, there is a Treasury, there is a Finance Department, there is a Foreign Trade, there is a Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, and this is the non-government organization dealing to be taxed with the Scientific and Research Council of Turkey. All. And then they have the chamber. Top is their chamber. They have Test Confederation of Trade Artisans. And everybody is working for COSGAP. COSGAP is not working for them. So this is how they have, through the political ownership, they have empowered the COSGAP. And I know that if SMEDA puts up its case coherently based on evidence and policy, there is no reason that they will not be able to convince the political leadership, because it's a win-win situation for the politicians and for the country as well. So the coordination dysfunction has been the problem all over the world. But there are ways and means of overcoming these coordination dysfunctions. But then SMEDA has to play the lead role through an inclusive, right-based approach. I am pretty confident that you will be able to somehow make headway with the government. You know, you are dealing with the government which is reasonable and rational. But don't assume of the government as if you are pounding your head against the wall and they are not listening to you. Slowly and gradually, you will be able to somehow convince them to.
Now, an example to implementation of recommendation of policy. When I was working on China, Beijing was highly polluted. The atmosphere was just awful. I am a compulsive walker, and I stopped walking because it hurt. So मैंने Chinese को कहा कि you got to fix the air of Beijing. तो उन्होंने कहा कि बिल्कुल ठीक कहते हो. Does the World Bank have people who could help us? I said, I'll find out. So I asked the bank people. They said, yes, we have experts who deal with city air. So हम उनको भेजते हैं. तो वो आए 2 या 3 आदमी थे. So they went around looking at what could be done immediately. And they came to me and they said, one simple thing needs to be done. Beijing is developing very fast. And all over Beijing, there are heaps of sand and loose dirt lying around. Beijing may breeze badi tez aati hai, and then goes up into the air. They use soft coal for burning. So it produces particles and they then condense with the dust, and that तो मैंने ये चीनियों को कहा कि ये हो रहा है तो उनका सोल्यूशन ये है make sure that all these things are covered with plastic that are lying outside. The GNU ने मुझे कहा done. It will be done within 2 days. तो वो मैंने इन आदमियों को कहा, मैंने कहा रुक जाओ 2 दिन और देखो, तो वो रुक गए, and then they went around and they said this was incredible. Every bit of loose stuff was covered with plastic. तो मैंने जीनियो को कहा कि आपने कैसे किया ये? वो कहने लगे बड़ा सिंपल है. There's a newspaper called People's Daily, which is the government's newspaper. हमने उसमें ये लिख दिया कि this is what you have to do. अगर आप नहीं करेंगे उसका जुर्माना है और 15 दिन की कैद है. So he said that the result was that within a day every loose sand and so they were properly covered. So I mean, if the government is convinced that you're there, I mean, we are not a totalitarian state which the Chinese are, that they can do this kind of thing. लेकिन ये जो contempt है हमारा about taxation is an example. मैं शायद ये आपको कह चुका हूँ, yesterday I spoke at Institute of Business Administration. तो वहाँ मैंने बताया था ये कि एक लड़की ने सवाल मुझे कहा आप ये टैक्स की बात करते हैं, मैं तो टैक्स नहीं देती क्योंकि I'm not satisfied that the tax I pay will be used properly by the government. I said, if you were in the United States and you were to make this statement, you will land in jail. Because you call for an individual to decide to pay tax or not, you have to pay. But then make sure through the parliament or whatever that what you pay is properly used by the government.
Thank you, sir. So there's a question from Sheikh Sajjad of LCCI. He would like to. There's many questions.
Thank you, sir. It's really a nice discussion and a good feedback from your good self. What I have dealt with, I mean, we are running SMEs for the last almost like 28 years. I've been in this business. The major problem, what we see is that data, we don't have any proper database. Pakistan doesn't have a very solid database. You see, if we don't have a good database, that has several kind of repercussions. Number one, we can't drive the tariff policy if we don't have a good database, because the registered business in Pakistan is like 0.3 million, and whereas we assume that the total business in Pakistan is almost like over 20 million businesses. So this is a very low base for tax. As well as the other repercussion is, once if we don't have if we have this low database, we can't drive tariff policy. That's why we are import a lot of materials from China, as we don't know that many of the materials that has been already manufactured or the agriculture-based material that has already been manufactured in Pakistan, and the duties are pretty high when we are the infrastructure. Structure. We do have structural problems like what we say that structural problems like we don't have. Like land problem, like agricultural, electricity, gas, high cost of doing businesses. And when we do import from China or other countries, our cost is very high, whereas the import cost is very low. Because many of the FTAs are signed because the departments doesn't know that these things are manufactured in quantity here in Pakistan. And this is the reason why SMEs most of the SMEs are a failure in this region. And once they have low income, they can't go for R&D, as well as they can't go for new technology. I mean, I believe this is the main problem. If we go for a solid database, that will solve many of our problems. I would like to have a views on this about. Thank you.
I mean, you're absolutely right in saying that information should become available to policymakers so that they can adopt the right kind of policies. I had a relative who was in charge of the urban unit in Pakistan. And unfortunately, he died in a plane accident. His name is Khalid Sherdil. And Khalid took me to his unit and showed me the work that they had done in generating data on urbanization in Punjab. And it was a beautiful presentation with enormous amount of data. So I asked Khaled, I said, okay, you've done this and you have some very interesting data and I learned a lot from this. What are you going to do with this? And he could answer that question, how that data would be used to make policies and how policies would be implemented and so on and so forth. That's one response. The second one is, everybody knows that burning of soft coal is very bad for the atmosphere. And government has a rule that these brick kilns that are very common in Pakistan should be either shut down or they should use other form of energy and not soft coal. Last year, when I was here in Pakistan, I went to see the Kartarpur corridor. And driving to Kartarpur from here, I was amazed to see how many brick kilns were still operating and throwing out this enormously black exhaust, polluting the thing. The government has a law, it shouldn't be done. They were doing it. The government has a law that these rickshaws must not emit this kind of exhaust, which is very heavy in diesel waste. So, policy, data needed for policy, making a policy, communicating that policy to decision makers, and then follow up to make sure that those policies are properly implemented. These are the challenges. And that's हमारे यहाँ casualness है about all this. The government has a policy that farm waste should not be burnt. We burn it. Consequently, I'm told, I was not here in the winter, that Lahore became unlivable. The same thing is happening in India. Delhi is suffering because of this. So, अब वो लंबी बात हो जाती है. You've got to educate people. You've got to convince them that their own actions are responsible for some of what's going on.
Thank you, sir. So Mr. Saeed Nawaz would like to ask.
Saeed Nawaz, I'm MD ka Pasco. So public policy management, learning from rest of the world, studying the best national practices, a way of doing the things in a better way. In Pakistan, sir, over the period, the culture of subsidies, subventions, and rollouts have developed a kind of culture that whatever is offered from the government, maybe for SMEs or mainstream industries, it's taken as an opportunity for quick benefits. So the people are generally not interested in establishing their enterprises or expanding their businesses. So since this is not a phenomenon which is very unique to us, rest of the world, I'm sure, must have gone through this kind of experimentations. So what we can learn from the rest of the world to address this phenomenon and put the things right, sir. Maybe an experience of a champion or leader on the top, or maybe a demand-driven kind of readjustments in the world experience somewhere else, which change this kind of culture or brought about a social reformation. Thank you.
There are 3 or 4 things involved in this. First, having the right kind of information to produce the right kind of policy. Then disseminating that policy to policymakers, and then continue the dialogue with the policymakers, whether they are really doing it or not. Sometimes you can have an impact. I'll give you an example of our own experience. We wrote a report 4 or 5 years ago on CPEC, and we looked at what were the advantages and problems implementing that very expensive program that the Chinese were financing. And I then presented the report in conference in a press thing in Islamabad. तो उसमें कुछ 40-50 लोग थे. मैंने presentation दी. So after the presentation was over, there's some question and answers, and then a Chinese gentleman walked up to me, and he said, "I am China's ambassador to Pakistan, and what report that you have done is an excellent report. This is the first time that an objective analysis has been done of why CPEC, what are the advantages for Pakistan of CPEC, and what are the advantages of China of CPEC, and why it is important to do this." So he said, "I want to talk to you a little bit more about this. Can we have lunch?" मैंने कहा, "Sure." So following day we had lunch. तो वो मुझे बताने लगा कि हमारी expectation ये थी, a lot of Chinese companies will come to Pakistan because Pakistan has things to offer which they need: cheap labor, reasonably trained people, and so on and so forth. लेकिन अब वो आए थे, लेकिन अब वो बड़े reluctant हैं. क्यों reluctant हैं? क्योंकि पाकिस्तान में ये feeling पैदा हो गई है that China is trying to colonize Pakistan, that this is a kind of East India Company type of thing. And he said papers publish these articles. People read these articles. And then there are 4 or 5 anchormen who repeat this. So there is a feeling in Pakistan that this kind of thing with China is not the right thing to do. And he said, "We know this. We have done work of this, that the articles that I'm talking about are written in India. Then they are sold to Pakistani authors who put their names on these articles and have them published." And he said, "I can give you the names of 4 or 5 TV anchormen who are in the Bay of India in order to broadcast this kind of thing." So मुझे कहने लगा कि if you have senior contacts with senior people, can you bring this to their attention? So then I had a talk with them, and finance minister, and all of them knew this. And they said, "We really don't know how to control this." Kal, when I went to IBA, or परसों कहीं और था, there was one guy who raised this issue. And he said, "Why are you in favor of greater involvement in China? They want to turn Pakistan into a colony of theirs." So you see, he was a student and he had bought this. Yeah. So I worked for 10 years as a senior visiting fellow in National University of Singapore. I used to spend summers over there. And I met a lot of Indian senior people who did what I was doing. And I used to have discussion with them about India-Pakistan relations. And I was amazed as to how anti-Pakistan Indian policymakers are, senior Indian policymakers. And they are determined to harm Pakistan, and they're determined to separate China from Pakistan. And they're doing these kinds of things.
Thank you, sir, for these very pertinent comments. Dr. Safdar Suhail Saab has a question.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम खाजा सब क्या हाल है खैरियत है ठीक है थैंक यू
Sir,
वेरी
thank
मच
you. Sorry for keeping you waiting, sir. There's a long queue, sir.
नहीं वो अब शायद टाइम कम है मैं तो बरकी साहब को सलाम करना चाह रहा था बरकी साहब शायद याद ना हो वर्ल्ड बैंक वाशिंगटन में 99 में इनकी फेयरवेल मैंने इनाम साहब मरहूम थे तब मैं सर पेरिस से आया था काम करने के लिए इन वर्ल्ड बैंक फिर बाद में when I was taking Pakistan to trade and development then also I came Sartaj Sabarab थे so it's very good to see you sir. And very good to see SMEDA benefiting from your experience. Sir, lately I've been working on deindustrialization and kind of developing a framework to reindustrialize Pakistan under a unified framework of greening and competitiveness, industrial competitiveness, combining three policies: industrial policy, Ministry of Commerce की competitive import substitution, as they say, and the greening imperative. तो उसको सर कैसे आप अपना do you think we have the state capacity to do this kind of heavy lifting? अभी सोनिया ने भी बात की coordination की तो वो ये competitiveness का element है तो SMEs में भी level playing field due to competition अब नहीं रहा तो उसमें people use government regulation to create a favorable environment for them and exclude other competitors. And do you think SMEDA should have that kind of at least an analytical role at the subsectors level, that what is happening in terms of
Doctor, we couldn't hear your last bit of your question, the observation. Doctor, can you hear us, please? His question for the subsectors that put the policy frame. Top.
You used the phrase reindustrialization. I don't think I would call the challenge reindustrialization. I would say proper industrialization. We need to make SMEs absolutely central to our industrial growth. I have written, as I've said, a lot about Pakistan's history, and I know Pakistan's history very well. We've come a long way. We started with all kinds of problems, and we've had problems, and then we found solutions that overcame them, and then we had problems again, and so forth. The point is that an organization such as SMEDA and other organizations that are dealing with policy issues must carefully examine what has gone wrong and how it could be put right, and what kind of policy framework is needed, and then produce short, readable papers for the government, and then, as I said, make a nuisance of yourself and make sure that they are followed, and use the press and use information media to make sure that the government takes notice of that.
Thank you. So the last question, I believe there are a number of questions that are lined up, but the federal tax ombudsman, because of his constitutional position and status, takes it, sir. So I'll request Dr. Asif Jha, sir. Please, over to you, sir. Kindly ask your questions or observation, please. Doctor, please.
We can't.
Doctor, we can't hear you. उनकी साइड पे मैं म्यूट किया हूँ.
Mute the kill.
Unmute.
फोन कर जी जी मैं करता हूँ हेलो डॉक्टर वालेकुम सलाम डॉक्टर साहब अनम्यूट आपकी तरफ से नहीं हो रहा है जी वी कांट हियर यू अनम्यूट नाउ सर वी कैन हियर यू सर लाउड एंड क्लियर काइंडली प्रोसीड सर प्लीज
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम everyone. I have been listening Barki Saab. I'm a great admirer of him and have read his columns on the economy. सर आपने बात की ना कि बैड गवर्नेंस और गुड गवर्नेंस की हमारे यहाँ प्रॉब्लम ही मेन प्रॉब्लम इज दिस कि राइट मैन फॉर द राइट जॉब नहीं होता फेडरल टैक्स ऑम्बर्ड्समैन का इंस्टीट्यूशन इट वाज एस्टैब्लिश्ड इन 2000 and I am the 6th federal tax ombudsman, but I am the first from the tax services. Previously, the men from other services have been heading this organization. For the last 1.5 years, I have tried to turn it into a public relief oriented organization. Sir, पिछले सालों में यहाँ ये होता था कि एक साल में 2000-2500 कंप्लेंट्स होती थी और उनमें बहुत सारी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन से भी रह जाती थी. Last 1 year, complaints against tax officials, tax matters, it was 7,000, and we have resolved 6,500 and given relief to the taxpayer. We have made another experience. We have involved the business community as honorary advisors and also persons from SME sectors. We have taken them into confidence and given them the charge of honorary advisor of the FTO. This has also bridged the gap and served our purpose. And a lot of people, most of our clients, they are from the SME sector. They have problems with tax administration, and we have been trying to increase the tax compliance, and also through our efforts, tax net, there is increase in the tax net also. So if right men for the right job, they are inducted, then a lot of changes can be made. We are ready to open I will inshallah discuss with Khwaja Saab to open a facilitation center of the federal tax ombudsman in the office of SMEDA, and we will work together for better tax compliance and ensure tax collection. So this is the only way. If the right men for the right job are appointed, they can make a difference. This is my comment and observation.
thank you sir we would be trying to look wherever the opportunities are with other federal agencies so we can take this development forward. So with these words, sir, there are a number of questions lined up, but due to the paucity of time, we would apologize to the rest of the people who are lined up, and perhaps at another time, at another day, with your kind permission, we would give them the opportunity. So with these words, I would like once again to thank today's all participants who have joined us both physically as well as online, and have benefited from this discourse that has taken place. And I would like and take this opportunity to state, sir, that we in Pakistan at various levels are cognizant of what is happening and what are the challenges. Unfortunately, due to many reasons, the policy dialogue in Pakistan that has stopped. And as Shahid Najam Saab was saying, perhaps the government, the private sector, the academia needs to create linkages and opportunities where this policy dialogue can continue. Your today's presence and talk was a part of a small kind of a beginning of this policy dialogue. And with the help of Institute of Public Policy, the Berkeley Institute, we would continue with this dialogue and engaged at various levels. So not only SMEDA, but other government agencies and other stakeholders which are critical to this process, they would also be able to give their policy input, and perhaps we in SMEDA can also learn from that. So I would, on behalf of all these SMEDA team members present over here physically, sir, and 100 plus of our officers and officials all over Pakistan who have been very keenly listening to your good self today, thank your good self for finding time for us and for bringing these kind of focuses that are perhaps were not there on the public policy radar screen. So within the policy corridors of Pakistan, I think so today's talk would go a long way.
Can I make one final point?
Please, sir.
I'm repeating myself, but I think the most important issue in Pakistan today is to increase the domestic savings rate, to increase the savings, the tax to GDP ratio, and to make sure that the government invests in the right kind of things. And I've spelled out what those right things are: education, health, women's welfare, transport, and so on. Savings rate, itna low hone, because the savings rate is so low, our economy is suffering. And it is suffering because people don't take the tax authorities seriously. Maybe I've said this before, but let me repeat. I worked at the bank for 26 years and my salary was tax-free. When a bunch of us retired from the bank and decided to stay on in the United States, we were addressed by a tax lawyer. And he said, tomorrow when you step outside the bank building, you become an ordinary citizen subject to taxes. And please take that seriously. One institution that everybody is afraid of in the United States is Internal Revenue Service, IRS. If you fool around with them, they will take away everything that you have, including your wife, because they are an implementation authority. The government decides what tax and how much, and they make sure that people pay. That is needed in Pakistan.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.